All right, time to chat a little bit. I had an amazing experience yesterday, amazing experience, and I'll get into that in just a minute. There's a trend I'm seeing in different discussions, come follow me, both on the local level here and in some of the YouTube presentations of Come Follow Me. I think we need to be a little careful on this. And here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that there is this approach of maybe condemning the early saints and calling out their faults and weaknesses. And that's the reason why Zion couldn't be established. And that the people didn't listen to the prophet Joseph, the members of the church, and they're wicked. And then therefore, the New Jerusalem couldn't be established. The Hans Mill people basically deserved what they had coming to them because they didn't listen to the prophet. Just kind of blaming, I guess, the early saints for the United Order not working and all those kind of things. Here's why I think we need to be careful. Has the United Order been reinstated? Has the temple been built in Jackson County? If we're going to point the finger at them, we need to point it at us because we haven't accomplished that either. So if we're willing to do that, then I think, I feel comfortable in saying, yeah, they had some issues that they needed to work through. They weren't as obedient as they should. They weren't willing to give up their money, their wealth, and put it into the common pot, if you will. But neither are we. Neither are we. So I just don't feel comfortable condemning those early saints. I just don't. And there's really good historic evidence, particularly on the people of Hans Mill, that they were really innocent of inflicting retaliation on the Missourians. They just didn't do that. And many historians feel like the people of Hans Mill felt like they had a big enough group, because really Joseph's counsel to those in Missouri were, if you're in outlying areas, gather into the city for protection. That's really what his counsel was. And the idea of Hans Mill folks is that they really thought that they had a big enough group to withstand any mobs. And they were a peaceful group. They were a peaceful group. And evidence of children being executed. So it was horrible, horrible, horrible. And I just don't feel comfortable myself condemning those early saints and saying, well, if they would have obeyed, everything would have worked out. Boy, it's easy to do things like that. I really feel, again, that if we're going to point our fingers at those early saints in Missouri, we need to point the finger right back to us, because we haven't accomplished what was laid out in section 104. I believe it's 104, the United Order. But we haven't done it either. So anyway, that's just something to start with. I see that trend, of condemning those early saints, and I don't feel comfortable with that. Anyway, okay, so I'm going to go right at the end of Come Follow Me for this week, section 105. There's just some gems. And you all listen to many, as do I, other sources for information, the historical background, and all those kind of things. But I wanted to touch on a few verses right towards the end. I'll start in verse 35. There's a couple of elements here that I think are really, really cool. So section 105, verse 35, there has been a day of calling, but the time has come for a day of choosing. Oh, I love that. It gets back to section 121. Many are called, but few are chosen. So there's been a day of calling, but now there's a day of choosing. And then I love this. And let those be chosen that are worthy. So I've mentioned this before, but it's almost like we choose to be chosen by being worthy. Okay? Being worthy. And verse 36, and it shall be manifest unto my servant by the voice of the Spirit, that those that are chosen, and they shall be sanctified. So worthy and then sanctified. So many good things here. Verse 37, and inasmuch as they follow the counsel which they receive, they shall have power. They shall have power after many days to accomplish all things pertaining to Zion. So this is where I think we have to be careful of condemning the early saints, because after many days to accomplish all the things pertaining to Zion, and we just learned in section 104 what that is, what those things are to establish Zion and that are pertaining to Zion. And these folks were told to do this in Kirtland. So the United Order, making all things in common and working together for a common goal. So the ones called, and then the ones that from that group, the ones that were called, if they chose to be chosen through their worthiness, they were sanctified, and then they received power to accomplish all the things pertaining to Zion. Well, did that happen? I believe it did. I do believe it did. And I believe that power was established in Kirtland when the Kirtland Temple was built. And it was those individuals that were not only called but chosen to fulfill that. Now, that doesn't mean they all stayed on the straight and narrow and that they all stayed chosen, if you will. But for that specific event and that power, if you go back to verse 33 in section 105, verily I say unto you, it is expedient in me that the first elders of my church, so these to me would be the ones that have, for the most part, they chose to be chosen, if you will, by their worthiness, and they were sanctified. But this is what had to happen. Verily I say unto you, it is expedient in me that the first elders of my church should receive their endowment from on high in my house, which I have commanded to be built unto my name in the land, excuse me, of Kirtland. I sneezed in my hand, sorry, and it's not COVID. I've been out mowing the lawn. A little hay fever, a little fall hay fever. Sorry about that. So this is the group we're talking about, the first elders. And these are the ones that witnessed so many things in Kirtland. And again, you can find exceptions, but there was enough that the sacrifice and the sanctification process that took place in building the Kirtland Temple. Oh, miracles. Go to Canada and convert this guy, tell him to bring his money, his conversion and his money, so that we can finish this temple. And so it was. Just awesome stories. Okay, now verse 38. So we're going to get a couple of different ideas out of these verses, and I'll bring it together sort of as we finish these verses. Verse 38. And again I say unto you, sue for peace, not only to the people that have smitten you, but also to all people. Peace. Okay? And lift up an ensign of peace, and make a proclamation of peace unto the ends of the earth, and make proposals for peace unto all those who have smitten you, according to the voice of the Spirit which is in you, and all things shall work together for your good. Therefore be faithful, and behold, and lo, I am with you, even unto the end. Even so, amen. Now, so we have this idea of being chosen, being sanctified, and then endowed with power. And then these verses of peace, and establish peace with your enemy. It's almost like you have to be sanctified and have power in order to have the ability to have peace with somebody that might be considered your enemy. Now, I'm going to get into the peace thing here in just a minute, but something jumped out at me with these verses if you combine them all. So in verse 36, we have the word chosen. In verse 35, we have the word calling. In verse 36, we have the word chosen. And in verse 41, we have the word faithful. And as I read that, those words jumped out at me in that combination. And I remembered a scripture in Revelation 17. So if we go to Revelation 17, this is amazing, because there are so many intense things in chapter 17 of Revelation. Verse 14, Revelation 17:14. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. And he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. Isn't that awesome? So there, and then in these verses in section 105, we have verse 35, called, verse 36, chosen, and in verse 41, faithful. So those are the qualifications to be on the Lord's team during this time of the showdown with Babylon, right? To be and the King of Kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. So that was really cool for me to tie in that chapter in Revelation 17 with section 105 of the Doctrine and Covenants, the qualifications to be with the Lord in that great battle of separating the wheat and the tares, getting away from Babylon. And I just love that. Called, chosen, faithful. And then adding the words sanctified and endowed with power. Just awesome things. Now, to finish up this video, I wanted to talk about this peace. And again, I say, this is verse 38 in section 105, and I've already read it, but I'll read it again. And again, I say unto you, sue for peace, not only to the people that have smitten you, but also to all people. Okay, so let me tell you this story or this situation that happened to me yesterday. Now, if you've been listening to me for a while, you know I'm a bit edgy, a bit unconventional when it comes to the soft church approach. You're not going to listen to hymns in the background if you called our home. It's like if you called the church office building and you're going to have some piano hymn music, in the background. That's not me. You'll probably have rock and roll or something like that. As we presided over a mission, we were probably unconventional, I guess. I don't know. Felt like we went by the Spirit, but just a little different, and you know that. Early on in my broadcast, people would say, "How come you don't wear, like a white shirt and a tie when you do this, or have a prayer, or do?" This is just me talking, right? It's not a formal meeting. So I can be confrontational, but then I can also be very forgiving and ask for forgiveness. After doing it, I'm kind of an open book when it comes to these things. So it just sounds different than the normal presentation, and so some of you can relate to it, and some of you it's a little bit harder for someone to talk about the scriptures and be a little rough around the edges as I am. And that's okay. I get that. I know it can be uncomfortable, and I'm not saying to feel comfort from how I do things. And I just say that to preface this story. So there's a walking path paved around the neighborhood. And it's real pretty. There's trees, common ground. It's really nice. In walking my dogs, I've had a confrontation with a lady that her dogs bark when my dogs walk by. Now, they're not on her property, they're in this common ground. And my dogs are not on a leash, but I have electronic collars. They're vibrating collars. And I've trained them. And I very seldom need to use that. It's usually if there's a cat that runs, and you don't want them to go running across the street or something like that. But they're very well behaved and good dogs. Anyway, this lady has yelled at me several times as I've walked past because their dogs start barking. And she says, "You should have those on a leash." And I said, "Well, the county says I can have them on this." And then it starts into a fight, and then I keep walking. And anyway, yesterday was a little different. The dogs were so good, and they were maybe a foot off the grass or onto the grass, not on her property, but and still on common ground, but closer to her property than being right on the sidewalk. And it wouldn't have mattered. Motorcycle. We'll probably hear an airplane. I think it's a Tumman 601. I flew one in Little Nettie Goes to War. I think it's a mail plane. How can you tell? Well, never mind. Anyway, we're close to an airport here, a small airport. But she came out with both guns blazing, and she had some colorful language. Interesting thing is, I had my earbuds in, and I was talking to my son when this all happened. And he said he could hear everything just perfectly. And she was dropping F-bombs and and in all honesty, when I walked past there, I would say probably 70% of the time she's not there and there's no issue. And 30% of the time there is. And so the question is, why do you walk past there, Brother Palmer? Why do you do that if you know that there's going to be a confrontation? And that's where I go back to I'm a sinner. I am, and it's one of my issues. I just feel like, well, hey, I have access to this. I don't need to. Pardon me. I can walk here. I'm not doing anything illegal. Everything's fine. So I'm going to keep doing it. And okay, so it got really ugly, and wow, she let me have it. And I raised my voice back, but mostly in like, hey, you're crazy, and I have every right to do this, and you got to stop with the foul language, and all this kind of stuff. So I wasn't just mild-mannered, and I didn't try to diffuse the situation at all. So I finished my walk, and she stormed off, and with another, she's good. And I had double-barreled flip-offs, if you know what I mean. So it was I don't know, it gets the blood pumping, when things like that happen. So I came home, and Sister Palmer was here, Sue was here, and at the house, and I said, wow, and Sue's had a confrontation with her too, and walking the dogs by herself. So she knew exactly who I was talking about. And I said, I'm going back there, and I'm going to get a piece of paper with my name, my phone number, and my address, and I'm going to try to get this resolved. And I'm going to give it to her and have her call me, or her husband, or both of them, where I can come over or whatever, and we can sit down and have a chat about this situation and get it resolved. Because I want to keep walking, So I wrote on a piece of paper, and I headed over there without the dogs and knocked on her front door. I rang the doorbell, and I heard the dogs barking in the house, her two dogs, and they're really nice dogs. They're not aggressive. My dogs aren't aggressive. They just bark. It's no big deal, but it really bothers her. Anyway, she told me behind the closed door, she told me to F off, and didn't want to see me. So I'd written my information on a sticky note, and I just put it on the door. It was kind of the smoke glass, so you could see, but not really well. But she knew she could tell who I was. So as soon as I stuck that note, man, she came flying out after me, told me to not touch that door or not leave anything. And again, there's an art to swearing, and this gal has not a master's but a doctorate degree in it. It just flowed so well. Sometimes those of us that aren't very good at that, or we don't do it very often, when we do it, or if we do it, it can be sound kind of awkward. But it was beautiful. It just flowed. So anyway, she was aggressive, and she was pushing me. I ended up on the sidewalk. I said, hey, this sidewalk, you better be careful here. I said, you can hit me and do whatever on your property, but on the sidewalk, this is public ground here, so be careful. And I had my finger, because my voice was raised. It was volatile. she grabbed my finger, and I thought she was going to snap it right off my hand. and the F-bombs were just flowing. I said, you know what? I'm going to have to call the sheriff on this and just try to get something resolved here, because you're obviously, not going to listen to me. So I put my phone on speaker and I dialed. It took me a second. I just, found the phone number. I just Googled the county sheriff and got it. So it rang immediately, but it was, the standard, like a voice message, recorded message. And she goes, "Will you just listen to me?" So I said, "Sure." So I hung up my phone and I sat and listened to her. And she was still hot and still bothered and still letting it loose. But I just shut up. I looked her in the eyes and I sat and listened. She was talking. I can't tell you exactly how this all worked out, but I went up to her and I just gave her a big hug. And she literally melted in my arms. And she was crying. I was crying. I wouldn't say I was crying. I had tears coming out of my eyes. She was bawling, I guess, and the voice was with it. Mine was not verbal, but my eyes were watering bad. And I held her for a long time on that sidewalk. It was amazing. And then we both apologized to each other. I hugged her again. We talked a little bit longer. I heard more of her story. I hugged her again a third time. The first time was not just a hug, it was holding each other. The church hugs are the little, and then, but this was an embrace. Maybe that's a better way, an embrace. Boy, it changed me that day, yesterday. I just thought, wow, that was awesome. That was so real and so awesome. And then I started thinking, okay, so what I could have done is just avoided that and never talked to her. And I think that's what a lot of us as saints do. We just avoid any kind of anything. But that's not me. I can't do that. But what ended up happening is Sue was doing some ministering, and that's why I was out by myself with the dogs. And so when she got back, she made a batch of zucchini bread. We can get rid of these zucchinis. My goodness. One plant next year, that's it, not two. So she made some zucchini bread, and we took it over. And we met her husband. And he had heard all about it. And we gave him all of our information and said, look, we're your neighbors, we're your friends. We're just not gonna have this confrontation. He goes, yeah, my wife feels just horrible. And he didn't volunteer to have her come and meet us at the door. So she was probably still reeling, even though it had been a few hours since then. But we have some good friends now. We do. And I would meet them anywhere. I'd go to dinner with them and have a great time. And I love them. So, sometimes it's good, I guess, to avoid any kind of thing. But on the other hand, sometimes we just need to have a real experience. I was hoping afterwards, I thought, I hope this was within our ward boundaries. And I was just, the beginning of this was awesome because there was some words flying. I didn't swear, but I was loud Okay. Um, Not that I haven't sworn before, but in this particular situation, I didn't. But it was so loud that I'm sure if anybody was even close, they would be out looking, through their window. And what I hope is that they saw that long, long, long embrace afterwards. It was awesome. I'm still just like basking in how good that felt to hold somebody that you just had a huge confrontation with. So when I read these verses in section 105, they have such powerful meaning to me now. Peace in 38, 39, peace twice. In verse 40, peace. So, we we're all so far from perfect. We all have our issues. We all have our causes and our things that we feel really strong about, and that's good. That is good, and I don't think we should avoid those things or just be like milk toast. Remember we talked about milk toast, where you have bread and you pour milk on it and it's soggy, and our old folks used to eat that for supper, and we're like, what? That's nasty. But have some real awesome real interaction with people, I think is so meaningful. I can't wait to see them again. And I'm not gonna have a confrontation now with the dogs. I'm gonna avoid that now, because I get it. I get why, and I'm not going to get into the details about her situation. That's between her and me. But yeah, she's justified in feeling frustrated when my dogs come by because of some things, right? And as I listened, as I just said, okay, I'll listen to what you have to say. And it wasn't that, she had this compelling argument or evidence. It wasn't that. I just felt some compassion for her situation, and just thought, this is ridiculous. And I didn't even think about hugging her. It just happened, and embracing her. Really, I like that word better. So anyway, an awesome experience I wanted to share with you. I feel really confident that she doesn't watch this at all or know, and I don't want to have anything embarrassing happen to this person because I'm saying this, and I don't think there's any chance of that. So that's why I do it, and I truly do love them. Their family. I do. I love them. I love their dogs. I love their children. I love them. I love their home. I love everything about them as a result of this cool experience. And I love you all out there. It's a good day. Christ is coming soon, in my opinion. And if we're looking for these experiences, we'll have them. And they're awesome. I love you all. Bye-bye.